I often ridiculed religious people. I considered them to be people of little intelligence, for whom faith was their only support. However, my views have changed. In August 1932, I had an accident, had a near-death experience, during which I was shown the afterlife. I saw what heaven looks like. After my return to earthly life, I wanted to tell as many people as possible about my experience. And now I have become an object of ridicule and criticism, especially from the church, said geologist Arthur Jensen. However, Arthur Jensen's memories of the afterlife did not cause criticism from everyone. Over time, people began to show more and more interest in this story. So Jensen had the idea to describe and publish a story about his experiences. This work is interesting not only for the experience that Jensen received. In it, the author also posted answers to the questions he received on the other side. For example, answers about the structure of the world and whether this world has a creator. Arthur Jensen's near-death experience was published in 1955. It began with a description of how Jensen left his body. I began to feel myself separating from my body, although I had previously believed that I was my body. And now it seemed to me that if I separated from it completely, I would die. Finally, I felt something inside me suddenly break, and I floated out of my body through the crown of my head. Arthur Jensen began to rise upward. Soon he rose so high that the earth almost disappeared from sight, and in its place a new world began to emerge. And this world became brighter and more real. Arthur Jensen found himself in a beautiful meadow. Somewhere in the distance, two high mountains were visible, their peaks covered with snow, and their slopes were decorated with plants of indescribable beauty. It seemed to Jensen that there were several dozen kilometers between him and these mountains, but he could see every flower growing on them. For some reason, my eyesight improved 100-fold. When I was studying these two mountains, I heard someone singing. Behind the trees, I saw people who seemed to be playing something, said Arthur Jensen. Soon, several people from this group approached Jensen to greet him. Each of them looked no more than 20 or 30 years old. Arthur Jensen was fascinated by the movements of these people. They were graceful and light. One of the strangers told Jensen that he was in the land of the dead. He also told him about some amazing abilities that the inhabitants of this country have. For example, they do not know fatigue and can swim in mountain lakes and come out of the water dry. Looking around, I suddenly felt that this place was already familiar to me. Perhaps I had already been here before. Then a sudden insight came to me. I remembered that this was my true home, that in my earthly life I was just a guest. For the world I had just left, I was a stranger, homesick. This is how Arthur Jensen described his feelings. While in his home, Jensen learned and remembered a lot about the structure of the afterlife. For example, here he understood why this world is eternal. This happens because all the elements in it do not mix and do not disintegrate, as in earthly life. Each element is held in place by an all-pervading supervibration, which does not allow the objects of the afterlife to age and deteriorate. Communicating with the inhabitants of the afterlife, Arthur Jensen wondered what a person should do in earthly life to get to a better place after his death. The answer was as follows: after the end of earthly life, souls are sorted by high and low vibrations. High vibrations indicate that a person did more good deeds during life, was selfless and spiritually developed. And low vibrations indicate that the person was only busy satisfying his selfish desires. After sorting, such souls will end up in the lower planes, which on earth are called hell. Arthur Jensen asked his new acquaintances to tell him what the lower planes are like. This is a place where cold reigns. Cold is a state of matter in which there is no movement of molecules. The same thing happens in the lower planes. They are inhabited by souls with slow vibrations, that is, with hatred, greed, malice, and so on. One stranger told me that he descended into the lower spheres. This place seemed dark, cold, and frightening to him. Souls live here who retain their earthly desires, but now they have no way to satisfy them. Such souls need help because they are not able to help themselves, Arthur Jensen explained. Another question Jensen asked the inhabitants of the afterlife was what God was like. However, no one could answer this question because no one had seen him. Jensen's new acquaintances said that they only felt a super vibration, which must be part of God. This vibration controls the entire universe and maintains order in it. Arthur Jensen realized that in order to understand God, you need to be as great as He is. Some believe in God, others do not. But when we get into a difficult situation, we begin to pray as if He exists, Jensen said. During the conversation with his new acquaintances, Arthur Jensen noticed that his mind was becoming clearer and clearer. He realized that everything in earthly life has its purpose. This is exactly what Jensen was reminded of. One of his interlocutors told him that he must return to earthly life. This caused Jensen to be indignant. He began to beg to be allowed to stay. However, my objections did not affect the decision already made by someone. The last thing I heard from my interlocutors was that important work still awaited me on earth. One of them told me that a time of great confusion would come, and many people would need my influence. And when my work in earthly life was completed, would be able to return to this beautiful world and remain in it. After these words, I felt a tingling and a feeling of compression. A moment later, I woke up in my body. This is how Arthur Jensen described the end of his journey to the afterlife. What do you think about this, dear viewers? Share your thoughts in the comments. And see you on our channel.